March 6, 1945. The shattered streets of Cologne, Germany. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth gripped the edge of his Panther's commander's cupola, scanning the rubble-choked approaches to the Cathedral through the acrid smoke drifting between buildings. His crew had been fighting for 3 days straight, watching their city once home to over 750,000 souls crumble under American artillery and the relentless advance of enemy armor. What Bartelborth and thousands of German tankers across the collapsing Reich didn't yet understand was that the Americans had deployed something new, something that would fundamentally alter the psychological calculus of armored warfare in these final, desperate months. The M26 Pershing, mounting a 90mm gun in a turret as massive as anything the Germans themselves fielded, had arrived in Europe carrying capabilities that challenged every assumption German tank doctrine had built over 6 years of war. The story of how American industrial might produce a heavy tank that could engage Tigers and Panthers on roughly equal terms, and more importantly, how German tank crews reacted when they first encountered this unexpected threat, reveals a profound truth about the final phase of armored warfare in Europe. German tankers had grown accustomed to technical superiority, to knowing that their Panthers and Tigers possessed advantages in firepower and armor that forced Allied tanks to maneuver desperately for flanking shots or call for air support. The appearance of Pershings, though arriving far too late and in far too small numbers to affect the war's outcome, shattered that psychological certainty in ways that transcended mere technical specifications. February 1945. Eastern France, near the German border. The first 20T-26E3 tanks, soon to be redesignated. M26 Pershing crossed the Atlantic in January and were distributed between the 3rd and 9th Armoured Divisions. These are experimental vehicles, rushed into combat as part of a program called the Zebra Mission, designed to evaluate whether American industry had finally produced a tank capable of fighting German heavy armor without relying on numerical superiority or tactical desperation. The crews selected to man these machines understood they were testing America's answer to a problem that had plagued Allied armored forces since Normandy. The M4 Sherman, backbone of American tank forces, had proven woefully outmatched by German Panthers and Tigers in direct engagement. Sherman crews developed grim gallows humor about their tanks, calling them Ronsons, claiming they lit like the popular lighter. First time, every time. While post-war analysis would show this reputation somewhat exaggerated, the psychological reality shaped battlefield behavior profoundly. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. German intelligence officers monitoring American deployments through early 1945 noted increased radio traffic, suggesting new tank types reaching frontline units, but the fragmentary reports failed to convey the significance. German reconnaissance, by this point in the war, had degraded severely. Luftwaffe air superiority, which had enabled detailed photographic reconnaissance of enemy formations throughout the early war years, had evaporated under Allied air dominance. German units depended increasingly on tactical reconnaissance conducted by ground forces, and these harried patrols rarely survived long enough to provide detailed intelligence about enemy equipment. The M26 represented a fundamental departure from previous American tank design philosophy, where the Sherman emphasized mechanical reliability, ease of maintenance, and rapid mass production, creating a tank that ordinary mechanics could service with basic automotive skills. Pershing adopted design principles closer to German heavy tank development. It mounted a 90mm M3 gun, comparable in performance to the famous German 88mm weapons that had terrorized Allied armor since North Africa. The gun could engage targets effectively at ranges up to 1,500 meters, with specialized high-velocity armor-piercing ammunition extending lethal reach even further under ideal conditions. The tank's armor protection, while not matching the extreme thickness of Tiger II King Tigers, provided substantially better protection than any previous American tank. The frontal glacis plate measured 102 mm thick, angled at 46 degrees from vertical, creating effective thickness approaching 140 mm. The turret front incorporated similar protection, with a massive cast gun mantlet varying between 120 and 140 millimeters. German tank commanders accustomed to penetrating Sherman armor from 2,000 meters would find the Pershing far more challenging. The development history leading to the Pershing's belated appearance reveals bureaucratic dysfunction and doctrinal rigidity that nearly cost American armored forces catastrophic casualties. As early as 1942, Army Ordnance Department engineers recognized that German tank development would eventually produce vehicles the Sherman could not effectively engage. The T-20 series of experimental medium tanks began testing various combinations of armor, armament, and powertrain systems that might create a superior combat vehicle. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, commanding Army ground forces, vigorously opposed heavy tank development. McNair believed tank destroyers, lightly armored, highly mobile vehicles mounting powerful guns represented the proper counter to enemy armor. Let the tank destroyers handle German tanks, McNair argued, while Shermans supported infantry and maintained mobility. This doctrine looked elegant on paper but foundered against battlefield reality, where German tanks ambushed American columns, destroying tank destroyers and Shermans with impunity before American forces could develop coordinated responses. The catastrophic losses during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 finally forced recognition of reality. When German forces launched their surprise offensive through the Ardennes, they concentrated hundreds of Panthers and Tiger IIs against American armored units, still predominantly equipped with 75mm Shermans. American tank losses exceeded 30% within the first week, far beyond anything doctrine had predicted. Urgent requests from frontline commanders demanding better tanks finally overcame bureaucratic resistance. Production of the T-26E3 began in November 1944 at Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan. Only 10 tanks emerged from the production line that first month. December yielded 30 more. By January 1945, when the first combat-ready tanks shipped to Europe, production had reached 70 units. This trickle of new heavy tanks, arriving as Germany collapsed under pressure from multiple fronts, represented too little, far too late to influence strategic outcomes. But for the crews who manned these machines, and more importantly for the German tankers who encountered them, the Pershing's appearance carried significance beyond mere numbers. The psychological dimension of armored combat rarely appears in technical specifications or after-action reports, yet profoundly influences battlefield effectiveness. German tank crews by early 1945 possessed years of combat experience and understood their equipment's capabilities intimately. A Panther commander knew his tank's 75mm Quark 42 gun could penetrate Sherman armor from extreme ranges, that his sloped frontal armor would bounce most American tank rounds, that his tactical position provided overwhelming advantages. This knowledge informed aggressive tactics and confident engagement decisions. Panther crews positioned in ambush could afford to wait for optimal shot angles, knowing American return fire posed minimal threat. Tiger commanders maneuvered deliberately, presenting frontal armor while closing to ranges where their 88mm guns could guarantee kills. German tactical doctrine throughout the war emphasized technical superiority as a force multiplier that compensated for growing numerical inferiority. One Tiger, properly positioned and handled by experienced crews, could devastate entire American tank platoons before retreating. The T-26E3's arrival in combat zones during February 1945 came with minimal fanfare and almost no advance publicity. Army security officials wanted to evaluate the new tank's performance before German intelligence could develop countermeasures or tactical responses. The 20 tanks, distributed between 3rd and 9th Armoured Divisions, represented experimental vehicles still undergoing combat evaluation, not standard production models integrated into normal organizational tables. Crews received abbreviated training, sometimes only days, familiarizing themselves with the new vehicles before entering combat. Technical challenges plagued these first Pershings in the field. The Ford GAA V8 engine, designed originally for the 30-ton Sherman, struggled to propel the 46-ton Pershing adequately. The tank's power-to-weight ratio proved marginal, resulting in sluggish cross-country performance and difficulty negotiating steep terrain. Crews quickly learned the Pershing lacked the Sherman's nimble acceleration and responsiveness. What the tank offered instead was firepower and protection, the ability to engage German heavy armor frontally without requiring desperate flanking maneuvers or suicidal close-range approaches. February 25, 1945. Near the Roer River, the 3rd Armored Division's Pershings entered combat for the first time, supporting infantry clearing German positions along the river approaches. Initial engagements pitted the new tanks against German defensive positions rather than enemy armor, allowing crews to familiarize themselves with the vehicle's handling characteristics and gun performance in actual combat conditions. The 90mm M3 gun proved devastatingly effective against fortified positions, its high explosive rounds demolishing concrete bunkers and stone buildings with single shots. German defenders reported seeing unfamiliar American tanks larger than Sherman's, with turrets mounting obviously heavier guns. These reports filtered back through Wehrmacht intelligence channels, but arrived garbled and contradictory. Some observers claimed the Americans had deployed British Firefly tanks with 17-pounder guns. Others suggested the new vehicles might be upgunned tank destroyers adapted for direct assault roles. None of the initial intelligence correctly identified the new tank type or assessed its capabilities accurately. The confusion stemmed partly from the Pershing's superficial resemblance to late-model Shermans. Both tanks shared similar hull profiles and track configurations. Viewed from distance through battle smoke and rubble, a German observer might easily mistake a Pershing for a Sherman variant, unless the massive turret and distinctly different gun provided clear recognition features. This initial misidentification would prove crucial during the most famous Pershing engagement of the war, February 26, 1945. Elsdorf, Germany. A T-26E3 named Fireball, belonging to F Company, 33rd Armored Regiment, 3rd Armored Division, moved forward to establish an overwatch position covering American infantry advancing through the town. The crew positioned their tank near a burning building, silhouetted against the flames, a fundamental tactical error that would prove nearly fatal. German defenders, including at least one Tiger I from Schwer Panzerabteilung 301, had concealed positions covering the approaches. The Tiger commander, observing through his optics from approximately 100 meters distance, recognized an American tank silhouetted perfectly against the fire. He ordered his gunner to fire immediately. The first 88mm round struck Fireball's turret front, penetrating through the machine gun port in the mantlet. The shell's impact killed both the gunner and loader instantly, and the concussion wounded the remaining crew. The Tiger's second shot struck the gun barrel, causing a round already chambered to detonate, distorting the barrel and rendering the main gun inoperative. A third shot glanced off the turret side, taking off the upper cupola hatch but failing to penetrate. Fireball's crew, stunned and bleeding, attempted to back the damaged tank away from the killing zone. The driver, despite injuries, managed to reverse the heavy vehicle down the street, while the surviving crew members scrambled to escape through hatches. Behind them, the attacking Tiger experienced its own crisis. While backing to a new firing position, the massive tank became entangled in rubble and debris. The crew, realizing they were trapped and vulnerable, abandoned their vehicle before American reinforcements could engage. This engagement, the Pershing's first encounter with German heavy armor, produced contradictory lessons. The Pershing had survived multiple hits from a Tiger's 88mm gun at point-blank range, something no Sherman could reliably accomplish. Yet the tank had also been knocked out, its crew casualties demonstrating that the Pershing, while tougher than its predecessors, remained vulnerable to German heavy guns under adverse tactical circumstances. The Tiger crew's escape denied American intelligence the opportunity to interrogate them about Forsos. Their assessment of the new American tank, Fireball, returned to service after repairs completed March 7th. The damaged turret was patched, a new gun barrel installed, and replacement crew members assigned. Within days, the rebuilt tank would participate in further combat operations, its battle-scarred turret serving as testament to both the Pershing's improved survivability and continued vulnerability. The Elsdorf engagement circulated through American tank units as crews discussed the new tank's performance. Soldiers noted that Fireball's crew had survived hits that would have certainly killed everyone in a Sherman. The penetrating shot through the machine gun port, a known weak point in the mantlet design, had proven lethal, but the tank's overall protection had enabled 3 crew members to survive and escape. This represented significant improvement over Sherman vulnerability, where penetrating hits typically resulted in catastrophic ammunition fires that killed entire crews. German intelligence reports following Elsdorf noted American deployment of new heavy tanks, but remained vague about specific capabilities. The Wehrmacht High Command, by this point, focused primarily on delaying inevitable defeat rather than conducting systematic intelligence analysis, paid minimal attention. Germany's industrial capacity had collapsed under strategic bombing and raw material shortages. Even if intelligence identified American tank improvements, German industry lacked capacity to respond with design modifications or new equipment development. The broader context of early March 1945 shaped every tactical engagement profoundly. Germany's western defences had disintegrated following the Bulge Offensive's failure. American and British forces pressed toward the Rhine from multiple directions, while Soviet armies advanced relentlessly from the east. German tank units, depleted by 6 years of attrition warfare and crippled by fuel shortages, fought desperate delaying actions with increasingly limited resources. Panther and Tiger tanks, when they could be fueled and maintained, remained formidable weapons, but mechanical reliability problems, spare parts shortages, and cratering morale degraded German armoured effectiveness daily. March 6, 1945, Cologne. The 3rd Armoured Division's spearhead elements had penetrated into the city proper, advancing through rubble-choked streets toward the Rhine bridges and the iconic cathedral that dominated Cologne's skyline. The advance, supported by infantry, proceeded methodically as American forces cleared buildings and eliminated scattered resistance. German defenders, cobbled together from remnants of multiple units, fought with surprising determination despite their hopeless strategic situation. The cathedral had become a powerful symbol for both sides. For Germans, the twin-spired Gothic structure represented cultural continuity amid devastation Cologne had endured over 260 separate air raids, reducing 95% of the city to rubble, yet the cathedral remained standing. For American commanders, capturing the cathedral intact would demonstrate their advance into Germany's industrial heartland and provide dramatic imagery for propaganda purposes. Several German tanks remained operational in the vicinity of the cathedral, including Panthers and at least 1 Panzer IV. These vehicles, positioned in covered locations among the ruins, waited to ambush advancing American armour. German tank crews understood their situation offered no hope of victory or even survival beyond perhaps a few more hours. What they could accomplish was delaying American seizure of the Rhine bridges long enough for retreating German forces to cross to the eastern bank before demolition charges dropped the spans into the river. Oberleutnant Bartelborth's Panther, positioned near the cathedral plaza, represented typical German armoured deployment during these final weeks. The tank had been moved into position during darkness, positioned to cover approach streets while using rubble for partial concealment. Bartelborth commanded an experienced crew who understood their tactical situation's grim reality. They would engage advancing American tanks, attempt to knock out several vehicles to slow the advance, then either retreat if opportunity presented or die fighting when ammunition exhausted. The Panther OSF. Mounting a 7.5 centimeter KOK 42 liters, 70 gun could destroy any Sherman from frontal aspect at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Against Shermans, Bartelborth's tactical position provided overwhelming advantages. His crew could afford to let American tanks approach to optimal range, ensure first-round hits, then engage additional targets before Sherman return fire could threaten the Panther's thick frontal armor. This confidence, built through years of technical superiority, shaped every German tank commander's tactical thinking. 2 M4 Sherman tanks, supporting American infantry advancing down parallel streets toward the cathedral, moved cautiously through the debris. Tank commanders, heads exposed through open hatches, scanned for threats while infantry squads moved alongside the vehicles, checking buildings for German soldiers armed with Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets. The advance proceeded with practiced caution. By March 1945. American tank crews had developed hard-won experience about urban combat's countless dangers. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Lieutenant Karl Kellner commanded the lead Sherman, a resident of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, who had received a field promotion to second lieutenant. Kellner had fought across France and into Germany with his crew. They understood their tank's limitations against German armor and relied on infantry support, artillery, coordination, and tactical movement to survive engagements with Panthers and Tigers. Standard doctrine emphasized avoiding direct confrontations with German heavy armor whenever possible. Bartelborth's crew detected movement at the street intersection ahead. Through his commander's periscope, Bartelborth identified an American Sherman approaching slowly. He ordered his crew to prepare for engagement, waiting until the American tank cleared the intersection enough to present a clean target. The Panther's gunner aligned his sight reticle on the Sherman's turret, estimating range at approximately 150 meters. Bartelborth gave the fire command. The first 75mm armor-piercing shell struck Kellner's Sherman through the gun shield. The projectile penetrated the turret front, detonating inside with catastrophic effect. Kellner, exposed in the commander's cupola, was mortally wounded. The gunner died instantly. 2 other crew members, stunned by the explosion, scrambled to escape the burning vehicle. A second German round followed moments later, ensuring the Sherman would not return fire. Technical Sergeant Jim Bates, photographer from the 165th Photo Signal Company, had accompanied the advancing armor, hoping to capture dramatic footage of American forces liberating Cologne Cathedral. His motion picture camera documented the Sherman's destruction in horrifying detail. Crew members bailing from the stricken tank, smoke pouring from hatches, the devastating efficiency of German tank gunnery. Bates's footage would preserve this moment for historical analysis, capturing both the lethal effectiveness of German tanks in ambush and the courage of American tank crews fighting through such encounters. The second Sherman, witnessing the lead tank's destruction, reversed rapidly to cover. The crew radioed for support, specifically requesting one of the new heavy tanks they knew operated somewhere nearby. Sergeant Robert Early, commanding T-26E-3 Eagle 7, designated by its vehicle number E7 painted on the fenders, received the call. His crew gunner, Corporal Clarence Smoyer from Lehighton, Pennsylvania, loader Private John DeRiggy from Scranton, driver William McVeigh, and radio operator Homer Davis had been supporting the advance from a parallel street. Early maneuvered Eagle 7 toward the intersection where the Panther waited. He understood the tactical challenge, approaching a German tank positioned in ambush, with clear fields of fire covering the intersection, required either accepting heavy risk or developing an indirect approach. American doctrine emphasized combined arms solutions infantry, armed with bazookas attempting close assault, artillery fire to suppress or destroy the enemy tank, or air support if weather permitted. But the urgency of the situation and the cathedral's proximity suggested immediate armor engagement. Eagle 7 approached the critical intersection. McVeigh, the driver, kept his periscope turned toward where the Panther had been reported, knowing that German tank crews tracked their targets and prepared to fire before American tanks achieved firing positions. Inside the Panther, Bartelborth's crew detected the approaching American tank. The sound signature seemed different from Sherman's. They'd engaged previously. The engine note carried different timbre, suggesting a heavier vehicle. Through his optics, Bartelborth caught his first glimpse of the approaching American tank as it began crossing the intersection. His immediate reaction, documented later through interviews with surviving crew members, reflected profound confusion. The tank did not resemble any Sherman variant he recognized. The turret appeared massive, mounting a gun far larger than the 75 or 76mm weapons he'd expected. The hull profile seemed different as well, suggesting heavier construction. For a critical moment, perhaps 2 or 3 seconds, Bartelborth hesitated. Was this actually an American tank? Could it be a German vehicle, perhaps a Panther from another unit attempting to cross the intersection? The markings were obscured by dirt and smoke, The tank's unfamiliar silhouette created uncertainty that proved fatal. Bartelborth later told his family, in conversations before his death years after the war, that he'd expected to see a Sherman and the vehicle that appeared simply didn't match his recognition patterns. Inside Eagle 7, Corporal Smoyer faced his own crisis. As McVeigh drove across the intersection, Smoyer rotated the turret to track the Panther's reported position. Through his gun sight, he saw the German tank's muzzle already trained in their direction. Standard procedure called for stopping the tank to stabilize the gun platform before firing. Moving shots were notoriously inaccurate and wasted precious ammunition. But Smoyer recognized he had no time for proper firing procedures. The Panther's gun barrel was already aimed directly at them. Smoyer fired, it on the move, taking everyone, including himself, by surprise. The 90mm M82 armor-piercing capped projectile, launched at approximately 810 meters per second muzzle velocity, struck the Panther's frontal hull armor just below the gun mantlet. At 100 meters range, against the Panther's 80mm frontal plate angled at 55 degrees, the projectile possessed sufficient kinetic energy to penetrate. The shell punched through the armor and detonated inside the tank's fighting compartment. Bartelborth and 3 other crew members immediately began evacuating the Panther. One crew member's clothing caught fire as he scrambled through the commander's hatch. The gunner, positioned deeper inside the turret, attempted to follow but became trapped when Smoyer's second round struck the turret ring. The impact killed him instantly, his body slumping back into the burning tank. Bates's camera captured the entire sequence the first hit. Crew members escaping with clothing ablaze, the second round striking, and the third shot sealing the Panther's destruction as flames towered from open hatches. The engagement lasted perhaps 30 seconds from Eagle 7's first shot to the Panther becoming an inferno. Yet those 30 seconds carried implications far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Jim Bates footage, showing an American tank destroying a German Panther in direct frontal engagement, would circulate through Allied units as tangible proof that American industry had finally fielded armor capable of fighting Panthers without requiring desperate tactical expedients. For German tank crews who learned of the engagement, the implications were more troubling. Reports described an unknown American tank variant, mounting a gun powerful enough to penetrate Panther frontal armor at close range, with armor protection sufficient to justify aggressive frontal engagement tactics. The psychological security of technical superiority, that crucial confidence enabling aggressive German armor doctrine had been compromised. Bartelborth and 2 other surviving crew members were captured hours later by a composite group of police and Volkssturm militiamen. Under interrogation, they described encountering an American tank they did not recognize, one that did not resemble the Shermans they'd been trained to fight. Bartelborth specifically noted his crew's fatal hesitation, caused by uncertainty about whether the approaching vehicle was friend or foe. They had waited for the American tank to stop, expecting standard Sherman tactics, instead of firing immediately. German intelligence officers examining the engagement sought to understand what new American equipment had entered the theater. The fragmentary reports from Cologne, combined with scattered observations from other sectors, gradually constructed a picture of American heavy tank deployment. But by early March 1945, German intelligence capabilities had degraded so severely that systematic analysis was impossible. Reports arrived days or weeks late, filtered through collapsing command structures, competing with hundreds of other urgent reports about Soviet advances in the East and Allied operations across multiple Western sectors. What German tankers understood instinctively, without requiring formal intelligence briefings, was that their technological advantage was eroding. The appearance of American tanks capable of frontal engagement against Panthers represented more than just one new weapon system. It symbolized American industrial capacity finally solving problems that German engineering had addressed years earlier, producing heavy tanks with powerful guns and substantial armor in quantities sufficient to deploy across multiple divisions. The psychological dimension of encountering Pershings affected German tank crews at visceral levels that technical analysis could not capture. A Panther commander who had fought confidently for months, knowing his tank's superiority over American armor, now faced uncertainty. Would the next American tank that appeared be a vulnerable Sherman or one of the new heavy types? Could he afford to wait for optimal firing solutions, or should he engage immediately from maximum range? These questions introduced hesitation and defensive thinking into German tactical decision-making. March 7, 1945. Following the dramatic engagement at Cologne Cathedral, American forces secured the Rhine bridges and consolidated control over the city. Among the captured German equipment and documents, intelligence officers found minimal information about the Pershing specifically, but extensive evidence of German demoralization and collapsing cohesion. Tank crews described feelings of hopelessness, facing endless waves of American armor, supported by overwhelming artillery and complete air superiority. The Zebra mission's technical evaluators compiled their assessment of the T-26E3's combat performance during March. The report, completed as the tank received its official M26 Pershing designation, concluded that the vehicle represented significant improvement over Sherman capabilities, but remained inferior to German Tiger II, King Tigers in direct comparison of firepower, armor protection, and mobility. What the Pershing offered was rough parity with Panthers and Tiger I tanks, the ability to engage these formidable German vehicles without suffering catastrophic disadvantage. Major General Gladion Barnes, Chief of Research and Development Section of Army Ordnance, who had personally led the Zebra mission to Europe, recommended immediate production increases and priority deployment to combat units. The Pershing vindicated his long campaign to develop American heavy tanks despite bureaucratic resistance. But even as production accelerated through March and April, the strategic situation evolved too rapidly for new equipment to affect outcomes. Germany's military collapse was accelerating toward inevitable conclusion. By late March 1945, over 300 M26 Pershing tanks had arrived in Europe, though only the original 20 that landed in January ever engaged in actual combat. The remainder sat in depots and training areas as American forces overran Germany with such speed that logistics struggled to keep combat units supplied with basic ammunition and fuel, let alone integrate new tank types into organizations already established and familiar with Sherman operations. German tank production, meanwhile, had virtually ceased. The Maybach engine plant at Friedrichshafen, bombed by Royal Air Force Bomber Command in April 1944, never recovered full production capacity. Strategic bombing of German industrial centers, combined with Red Army advances that overran factories in eastern territories, strangled armament output. Panther production that had reached 3,900 units during 1944 fell to barely 1,300 units during the first 4 months of 1945 before collapsing entirely. Even when Panthers and Tigers rolled off production lines during these final months, fuel shortages often kept them immobile. German synthetic fuel production depended on hydrogenation plants that required reliable electrical power and steady supplies of coal. Allied bombing systematically destroyed these facilities while Red Army advances captured Silesian coal fields that had supplied German industry since the war's beginning. By March 1945, fuel allocations to combat units had fallen so low that tank commanders received explicit orders to conserve fuel by limiting movement to essential combat operations only. The story of German tankers examining captured M26 Pershings represents a tale that never fully developed because so few Pershings entered combat, and Germany's collapsing military infrastructure prevented systematic evaluation. Scattered reports exist of individual German soldiers examining destroyed or abandoned Pershings, but no evidence suggests formal technical evaluation like the exhaustive testing Germany conducted on captured Shermans at Kummersdorf, proving grounds earlier in the war. By March 1945, Germany lacked the organizational capacity, secure facility access, or strategic purpose to conduct such evaluation. What German tankers did understand, through bitter combat experience, was that American industrial capacity had finally produced armor matching German technical standards in key performance categories. This realization carried profound psychological weight. German propaganda throughout the war had emphasized Aryan technical superiority and German engineering excellence. The appearance of American tanks capable of destroying Panthers and Tigers in direct engagement demolished these comforting myths. April 1945. Various locations across disintegrating Germany. German tank crews, those who survived the war's final weeks, witnessed Wehrmacht disintegration around them. Panzer units dissolved as fuel exhaustion immobilized vehicles, spare parts vanished, and command structures collapsed. Tank commanders increasingly received orders to abandon their vehicles and fight as infantry, or simply to surrender to advancing Allied forces. The technical excellence of Panthers and Tigers became irrelevant when these sophisticated machines stood immobile for lack of diesel fuel or had been abandoned due to mechanical failures that could not be repaired. A Panther crewman named Johann Müller, interviewed decades after the war, recalled seeing an American Pershing for the first time during late April near the Elbe River. His unit had abandoned their Panthers after running out of fuel and were retreating on foot when American tanks overtook them. Müller specifically remembered the Pershing's massive turret and powerful gun, noting it looked like German Tigers he'd seen but with American markings. The visual similarity between Pershing and German heavy tanks struck him as ironic. American industry had seemingly adopted German design philosophy after years of emphasizing lighter, more mobile tanks. This observation captured important truth. The M26 Pershing represented American industry's response to German heavy tank development, an acknowledgement that technical specifications and armor protection mattered decisively in armored warfare. The Sherman, for all its mechanical reliability and ease of production, could not effectively fight Panthers and Tigers without accepting catastrophic losses or relying on supporting arms to compensate for inadequate firepower. The Pershing addressed this deficiency through heavier armor and a larger gun design choices that sacrificed some mobility but enabled direct engagement. German engineers, examining the broader trajectory of American tank development through scattered intelligence reports, available during early 1945, recognized patterns similar to their own experiences. Both Germany and America had begun the war, emphasizing medium tanks, Panzer IIIs and IVs for Germany, M3 and M4 models for America that balanced firepower, protection, and mobility. Both discovered through combat that facing heavily armored opponents required heavier tanks mounting more powerful guns. Germany developed this response earlier, fielding Tigers in 1942 and Panthers in 1943. America's parallel development resulted in the Pershing, delayed by bureaucratic resistance but following similar technical logic. The fundamental difference lay in industrial capacity rather than technical understanding. German factories, even before strategic bombing intensified, struggled to produce sufficient numbers of complex, resource-intensive heavy tanks while simultaneously maintaining output of all other weapon systems. American industry, operating far from any combat zone with secure access to global raw materials, could scale up production of complex new tank designs while continuing to manufacture Shermans, aircraft, artillery, trucks, and every other item modern warfare demanded. This industrial disparity doomed Germany, regardless of individual weapon system quality. Even if the Pershing had never been developed, American numerical superiority in armor would have eventually overwhelmed German defenders. But the Pershing's appearance eliminated German tankers' psychological advantage, the confidence that their technical superiority provided tactical edge offsetting numerical inferiority. Knowing that approaching American tanks might include Pershings capable of destroying Panthers frontally introduced uncertainty into every engagement. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally, ending the European War. Among the countless after-action reports and intelligence assessments compiled during subsequent months, evaluations of the M26 Pershing occupied relatively minor space. Only 20 Pershings had seen actual combat, engaging in perhaps a dozen significant tank versus tank encounters. The sample size was too small to draw definitive tactical conclusions about the tank's effectiveness relative to German armor. What could be concluded definitively was that the Pershing represented significant improvement over Sherman capabilities. In encounters with Panthers and Tigers, Pershings demonstrated ability to penetrate German armor at combat ranges, while surviving return fire that would have destroyed Shermans. The 90mm M3 gun proved roughly equivalent to German 88mm weapons in armor-penetrating capability, giving American tankers their first weapon that could reliably threaten German heavy armor from frontal aspect. German military analysts, those not awaiting war crimes, trials, or already imprisoned, conducted their own assessments when Allied intelligence officers interviewed them about technical and tactical aspects of the war. Several former Panzer officers noted the Pershing's appearance during final months as confirmation of American industrial ability to match German technical developments once American industry committed resources to solving specific problems. This observation carried implicit criticism of German strategic planning that had underestimated American industrial capacity throughout the war. One former Panther battalion commander, interviewed extensively by American intelligence, specifically addressed the psychological impact of encountering Pershings. He noted that Panther crews by early 1945 had developed confidence bordering on arrogance about their technical superiority over American armor. This confidence enabled aggressive tactics and willingness to engage multiple enemy tanks simultaneously. When reports circulated that Americans had deployed tanks comparable to Panthers in capability, this confidence eroded rapidly. Crews became more cautious, less willing to take tactical risks, more focused on survival than achieving tactical objectives. This psychological shift, he argued, mattered more than technical specifications suggested. A Panther crew that engaged decisively, confident in their tank's superiority, would consistently defeat larger numbers of Shermans through superior tactics and aggression. A Panther crew fighting defensively, uncertain whether approaching targets were vulnerable Shermans or dangerous Pershings, would hesitate and lose initiative. The mere knowledge that some American tanks now possessed comparable capability degraded German tactical effectiveness across entire sectors, even where no Pershings actually operated. The famous Cologne Cathedral engagement crystallized this psychological dynamic perfectly. Bartelborth's crew, encountering an unfamiliar American tank, hesitated fatally because the vehicle did not match their recognition patterns. They expected Shermans, and the Pershing's appearance introduced doubt that cost precious seconds. In tank combat, where fractions of seconds determined who fired first and thus who survived, this hesitation proved lethal. Decades after the war, historians and military analysts continued debating what might have occurred had Pershings deployed earlier and in greater numbers. Some argued that American armored forces equipped with Pershings from June 1944 onward could have shortened the war by months, reducing casualties and preventing the devastation of the Bulge offensive. Others contended that by late 1944, Germany's military collapse was inevitable, regardless of specific weapon systems, and that Sherman numerical superiority, combined with Allied air dominance, provided sufficient advantage. What remains undeniable is that German tankers who encountered Pershings recognized immediately that American industry had closed the technical gap they had exploited for years. The 90mm gun, mounted in that massive turret, represented capabilities. German crews respected capabilities roughly equivalent to their own 88mm weapons that had terrorized Allied armor since North Africa. When German tank commanders evaluated threats, they now had to consider that some percentage of approaching American tanks could engage them effectively at combat ranges, fundamentally altering tactical calculations. The technical specifications of the M26 Pershing, when compared directly to German heavy tanks, revealed interesting parallels and distinctions. The standard M3 90mm gun fired M82 armor-piercing capped projectiles at approximately 810 meters per second muzzle velocity. Against homogeneous armor plate at 0 degrees obliquity, this projectile could penetrate approximately 120 millimeters at 1,000 meters range. The Tiger I's frontal hull armor measured 100 millimeters, thick, positioned vertically without significant sloping. At ranges under 1,000 meters, the Pershing's standard ammunition could reliably penetrate Tiger frontal armor. The Panther presented a more challenging target. Its 80mm glacis plate, angled at 55 degrees from vertical, created effective thickness, approaching 140 millimeters. The Pershing's standard ammunition struggled against this sloped armor except at very close ranges or when achieving hits on less protected areas like the gun mantlet or turret sides. However, American ordnance had developed high-velocity armor-piercing ammunition designated T-44 HVAP rounds, using tungsten carbide penetrators, similar to those that had proven effective in 76mm Sherman guns. The 90mm HVAP round achieved muzzle velocities exceeding 1,000 meters per second and could penetrate approximately 200 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters range. This specialized ammunition gave Pershing crews the capability to engage even Panthers frontally at combat ranges, though HVAP rounds remained scarce throughout the war due to tungsten shortages. Crews typically carried only a few HVAP rounds among their 70 projectiles, reserving them for encounters with German heavy armor. German intelligence officers, examining destroyed or captured Pershings when opportunities arose during April 1945, noted the sophisticated fire control systems and crew ergonomics. The Pershing incorporated lessons learned from years of American combat experience, including improved crew positions, better vision devices, and more intuitive control layouts. German tank designers had pioneered many crew comfort and operational efficiency features, but by 1945, American engineers had matched or exceeded German standards in most areas. The gun stabilization system particularly impressed German technical evaluators. While not present on all Pershing variants and of limited effectiveness compared to post-war stabilization systems, the gyroscopic stabilizer helped maintain gun alignment during movement across rough terrain. This gave American tankers marginal advantage in engagement speed, allowing them to fire accurately more quickly after stopping or to attempt shots while moving at slow speeds. German tanks lacked comparable stabilization, requiring full stops for accurate fire. One aspect where the Pershing demonstrably lagged behind German heavy tanks was mobility. The Ford GAA engine's 500 horsepower proved barely adequate for the tank's 46-ton weight, producing a power-to-weight ratio of approximately 10.9 horsepower per ton. By comparison, the Panther's Maybach HL 230 engine generated 700 horsepower for 45 tons, yielding 15.6 horsepower per ton. This translated into noticeably superior acceleration and cross-country performance for Panthers, when mechanical irreliability allowed. German tankers who observed Pershing's maneuvering during combat operations noted their relatively sluggish performance compared to both Sherman's and German medium tanks. One Panther commander, writing in his post-war memoirs, described watching a Pershing attempting to climb a steep embankment, the heavy tank's tracks spinning and struggling for traction. He noted that his Panther, despite similar weight, could have negotiated the obstacle far more easily given adequate engine power. This mobility disadvantage meant Pershings could not exploit tactical opportunities requiring rapid movement or pursue retreating German forces as effectively as lighter American tanks. The transmission represented another weak point that German mechanics recognized when examining captured vehicles. The Pershing employed a torque-matic transmission adapted from earlier American tank designs, providing adequate but not exceptional reliability. German transmissions on Panthers and Tigers suffered notorious reliability problems throughout the war, so German technical personnel were perhaps uniquely qualified to recognize transmission design challenges. They noted that American engineers had prioritized simplicity and maintainability over theoretical performance optimization, a design philosophy that produced better results in sustained field operations than German approaches, emphasizing complex engineering solutions. April 12, 1945, Dessau, Germany. A unique engagement occurred when two Super Pershing tanks T-26E4 variants mounting the experimental T-15E1 high-velocity 90mm gun encountered German armor. These extraordinary vehicles represented attempts to enhance Pershing firepower to levels matching or exceeding the Tiger II's formidable 88mm KOK 43 liters, 71 gun. Only two Super Pershings reached Europe during the war, both assigned to the 3rd Armoured Division. The T-15E1 gun, with its barrel 73 calibers, long compared to the standard M3's 53 calibers, achieved muzzle velocities approaching 1,140 meters per second with specialized ammunition. At 1,000 meters range, this weapon could penetrate over 260 millimeters of armor, sufficient to defeat even King Tiger frontal protection. The dramatically enhanced performance came at cost. The longer, heavier barrel required external counterweights on the turret bustle and the specialized ammunition proved difficult to handle and stow inside the tank. One Super Pershing engaged and destroyed a King Tiger and a Panther during the fighting near Dessau. German survivors of this engagement reported absolute shock at seeing their supposedly invulnerable King Tiger penetrated and destroyed by American tank fire from ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. The King Tiger, with frontal armor measuring 180 mm thick on the turret and 150 mm on the hull, the glacis, had been considered essentially immune to any Allied tank gun. The Super Pershing's high-velocity gun demolished this assumption. However, the Super Pershing program never progressed beyond experimental deployment. Only 25 production models were authorized in March 1945, with actual manufacture capped at that number when the European War ended. The extreme gun performance came with handling difficulties, stowage problems for the oversized ammunition, and questions about whether such firepower was necessary when standard Pershings proved adequate against most German armor. Post-war development would pursue different approaches to enhancing tank firepower. German tank crews who survived encounters with Pershings universally commented on American tactical employment. Unlike German armor doctrine that emphasized maneuver warfare and independent armored operations, American forces integrated tanks into combined arms teams, including infantry, artillery, tank, destroyers, and air support. Pershings never operated as purely armored formations seeking decisive tank battles. Instead, they supported infantry advances, provided mobile fire support, and served as breakthrough weapons during assaults on fortified positions. This tactical employment reflected fundamental differences in American and German military doctrine. German panzer divisions were designed as independent operational formations capable of deep penetration operations, encirclements, and decisive battles. Success required superior individual tank performance, allowing smaller numbers to defeat larger enemy forces through technical excellence and tactical skill. American armored divisions emphasized integration with other combat arms, using superior logistics, artillery support, and air coordination to overwhelm enemy forces through systematic application of combined firepower. The Pershing fit naturally into American combined arms doctrine. Its improved armor protection allowed it to lead advances where Sherman's would have been too vulnerable. Its 90mm gun could destroy fortified positions and defeat German armor without requiring specialized tank destroyer support. But the Pershing remained fundamentally a supporting weapon, not the independent maneuver arm that German armor doctrine emphasized. This difference in tactical philosophy mattered more than individual tank specifications in determining operational effectiveness. German officers analyzing the Pershing's combat employment noted that American forces never relied on the new tank's technical capabilities alone to achieve tactical objectives. Even when Pershings led advances, they operated with infantry support to prevent Panzerfaust ambushes, artillery forward observers to coordinate fire support, and air cover to suppress German defensive positions. This methodical, resource-intensive approach frustrated German commanders who saw opportunities for exploitation that American caution prevented pursuing. Yet, American combined arms methodology proved devastatingly effective. German tank aces, skilled commanders who had achieved remarkable kill ratios through technical excellence and tactical brilliance, found themselves defeated by American systems that overwhelmed them with coordinated firepower from multiple sources. A Panther that destroyed 3 Shermans and 2 tank destroyers would then be killed by artillery fire, called by surviving American units, or strafed by fighter bombers, or disabled by bazooka teams infiltrating through infantry positions. Individual technical superiority could not overcome systematic combined arms superiority. The fate of Wilhelm Bartelborth, the Panther commander from the Cologne Cathedral engagement, illustrated the broader trajectory of German tank crews during the war's final weeks. Bartelborth survived his Panther's destruction and subsequent capture. After brief imprisonment, he returned to civilian life in post-war Germany. In interviews conducted decades later for German television documentaries about the war, Bartelborth discussed his experiences with remarkable candor. He acknowledged that by March 1945, he and his crew had known their situation was hopeless. They fought not for victory, that possibility had vanished months earlier, but from sense of duty, loyalty to comrades, and perhaps simple momentum of military discipline maintained even as broader strategic purpose evaporated. The appearance of the Pershing during their final engagement represented fitting symbol of Germany's industrial defeat. They had been told throughout the war that German engineering excellence and technical superiority would compensate for enemy numerical advantages. The Pershing's 90mm gun demonstrated that American industry could match German capabilities when it chose to apply resources to specific problems. Bartelborth specifically reflected on his fatal hesitation upon first seeing the Pershing. He had been trained to recognize American tank types, primarily Shermans and tank destroyers. The Pershing's unfamiliar silhouette introduced uncertainty at the worst possible moment. This recognition failure, being confused by an enemy tank that did not match expected patterns, symbolized Germany's broader strategic surprise at American industrial capacity. German planners had underestimated American ability to innovate and produce throughout the war, assumptions that contributed directly to Germany's defeat. Post-war analysis by military historians examining the Pershing's combat record produced mixed assessments. By most objective measures, the M26 arrived too late and in too few numbers to affect the war's outcome significantly. Only 20 tanks saw actual combat, participating in perhaps a dozen significant engagements against German armor. Total Pershing tank production reached approximately 2,200 units by war's end, but the vast majority never left American shores before Germany surrendered. Yet the Pershing's psychological impact exceeded its limited combat deployment. Knowledge that Americans had fielded heavy tanks comparable to Panthers spread through German forces rapidly, affecting morale and tactical thinking across sectors where no Pershings actually operated. German tank crews became more cautious, less aggressive, more focused on survival than on achieving tactical objectives through bold maneuver. This psychological erosion of confidence contributed to Germany's military disintegration during final months as systematically as material defeats and strategic bombing. The technical legacy of the M26 Pershing extended far beyond World War II. The basic design philosophy, mounting a powerful gun in a heavily armored turret on a mobile chassis, established patterns that influenced American tank development for decades. The M46 pattern, which replaced the Pershing beginning in 1949, was essentially an upgraded M26 with improved engine and transmission, addressing the original's mobility deficiencies. The M47, M48, and M60 series all traced their lineage directly back to Pershing design concepts. During the Korean War beginning in June 1950, M26 Pershings saw extensive combat against North Korean and Chinese forces, equipped with Soviet-built T-3485 tanks. In this environment, the Pershing's capabilities proved decisively superior. The 90mm gun could penetrate T-34 armor at all combat ranges, while Soviet 85mm guns struggled to defeat Pershing frontal protection. American tank crews achieved favorable kill ratios, with Pershings accounting for 32% of all tank versus tank engagements, despite comprising smaller percentage of total American armor. German tank veterans, watching Korean War reports and technical analyses, noted with interest that their old adversary, the T-34, that had shocked German forces on the Eastern Front in 1941, now faced American tanks with capabilities roughly equivalent to late-war German armor. This progression validated German assessment that American industry could match any technical challenge once resources were committed. The Pershing in Korea performed essentially as Panthers and Tigers had performed against Soviet T-34 seconds during the Eastern Front campaigns, demonstrating that technical excellence in armored warfare followed universal principles regardless of national origin. Soviet tank designers, developing their own responses to American armor during the Cold War arms race, studied captured Pershings extensively. Several M26 tanks fell into Soviet hands during the Korean War, providing opportunities for detailed examination. Soviet technical reports praised the Pershing's gun performance and armor protection, while criticizing its inadequate mobility. These assessments influenced Soviet heavy tank development, including the IS-3 and T-10 heavy tanks, designed specifically to counter American armor. The circular progression of tank development, each nation studying enemy designs and incorporating successful features into their own vehicles, characterized the entire Cold War era. Design concepts pioneered by Germans during World War II influenced American, Soviet, and British tank development for decades. The sloped armor that made Panthers so effective against Allied guns became a universal feature of post-war tank designs. Powerful guns capable of defeating heavy armor at long ranges, exemplified by the German 88mm and American 90mm weapons, established baseline performance requirements that drove continued weapon development. For the German tankers who had fought against Pershings during March and April 1945, the years following the war brought complex mixture of emotions. Veterans organizations formed in both West and East Germany, bringing together former soldiers to share memories and process trauma. Many Panther and Tiger commanders participated in these organizations, contributing to historical documentation and tactical analysis that preserved knowledge of armored warfare during the war's final campaigns. Some German veterans expressed grudging respect for the Pershing as worthy adversary that finally gave American tankers equipment matching German standards. Others remained bitter about what they perceived as inevitable defeat resulting from overwhelming material superiority rather than tactical excellence. A few former Panzer officers contributed to post-war American and British military studies, providing detailed insights into German tactical doctrine and technical assessments of Allied equipment, including the M26. The famous Cologne Cathedral engagement remained subject of continued analysis and discussion among armor veterans and historians. Jim Bates's footage, capturing the entire sequence from Sherman destruction through Panther elimination, provided unprecedented visual documentation of tank combat. Military academies worldwide used the footage in tactical training, highlighting both the dangers of exposing tanks in urban combat and the effectiveness of proper combined arms coordination. Clarence Smoyer, the Pershing gunner who fired the fatal shots destroying Bartelborth's Panther, carried complex feelings about the engagement throughout his long life. Interviewed extensively during his later years, Smoyer emphasized the fear and confusion of combat rather than any sense of triumph. He noted that he had simply done his job under extreme pressure, that his shot fired while moving, without proper aim, succeeded more through fortune than skill. The image of German crew members bailing from the burning Panther, one with clothing aflame, haunted him for decades. Smoyer also noted the irony that he survived the war's final months partly because his crew manned a Pershing rather than a Sherman. Several of his friends from training days died in Sherman tanks destroyed by German armor during the final advance into Germany. The Pershing's improved protection had saved his life during several engagements, where German return fire struck his tank without penetrating. Technical superiority, which German tankers had enjoyed for most of the war, proved as valuable for American crews once they finally received comparable equipment. The broader context of the Pershing's development and deployment illustrated fundamental differences between American and German approaches to military technology and industrial mobilization. Germany entered World War II with carefully developed doctrine emphasizing armor and mobility, fielding tank designs that reflected years of theoretical development and training. As combat revealed deficiencies, particularly when encountering Soviet T-34 seconds and KV-1 second, German industry responded by developing increasingly sophisticated and powerful tanks. This German approach prioritized technical excellence and sophisticated engineering solutions. Panthers and Tigers represented remarkable achievements in armor design, incorporating advanced features and pushing performance boundaries. But this sophistication came at tremendous cost in manufacturing complexity, resource consumption, and maintenance requirements. German factories could never produce heavy tanks in quantities sufficient to offset numerical inferiority against multiple enemies on multiple fronts. American industrial philosophy approached tank development from different perspective. The Sherman's design emphasized mass production, mechanical reliability, and ease of maintenance rather than maximum performance. This choice proved strategically sound when production numbers were considered. American factories produced nearly 50,000 Shermans compared to roughly 6,000 Panthers. But the tactical costs were severe, as American tank crews faced German armor with inadequate weapons and protection. The Pershing represented American industry's compromise between these approaches. The design incorporated sophisticated features and prioritized performance capabilities roughly matching German heavy tanks, accepting reduced production numbers and increased complexity as necessary trade-offs. That this compromise came so late in the war resulted from bureaucratic resistance and doctrinal rigidity that nearly proved catastrophic. Had the Bulge offensive not demonstrated Sherman inadequacy so dramatically, Pershing deployment might have been delayed even longer. For German tank crews, the lesson drawn from encountering Pershings was that American industrial capacity, once fully engaged, could match any challenge. German technical superiority during early war years resulted partly from genuine engineering excellence, but also from American industrial focus on other priorities. When American resources concentrated on developing heavy tanks, the result, while belated, demonstrated capabilities matching or exceeding German achievements. This realization carried implications beyond immediate tactical situations, suggesting that Germany's long-term strategic position had been hopeless once American industrial might fully mobilized against them. The war ended with hundreds of Pershings deployed across Germany, but having seen minimal combat. Veterans of the 20 tanks that fought during March and April 1945 were proud of their contribution, knowing they had demonstrated American industrial capacity to produce competitive heavy tanks, but they also recognized that the war's outcome had never truly depended on the Pershing's capabilities. American victory resulted from overwhelming material superiority across every category: armor, artillery, aircraft, supplies, logistics backed by industrial capacity no enemy could match. German tankers, reflecting on their experiences during post-war years, generally acknowledged this reality. Individual technical excellence, tactical skill, and combat experience provided advantages in specific engagements. But systematic superiority in production, logistics, and resource availability determined strategic outcomes. The Pershing symbolized this truth, arriving late, deployed in limited numbers, yet demonstrating that American industry could produce whatever equipment circumstances demanded once resources were committed to solving specific problems. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.